Okay, so if the panelists for this session would come on up, that'll be great. Again, thank you and welcome to this summit today. I'd like, as they're coming up, to introduce Dr. Carla J. Evers. She proudly serves as the Superintendent of Schools for Pass Christian Public School District. She has the top #2 rated school district in the entire state. Her passion is found in ensuring students of Pass Christian receive a world-class education through a commitment to excellent, strong community partnerships and a resolve to transform lives. She has about 30 years of experience as an educator and has won numerous awards, and she has been recently named as one of the top influencers in the state. But the thing I'm most proud of is that she is one of our they're all stellar, advisory board member, board of directors for the Children's Foundation. Dr. Evers?
Thank you, Linda. Good morning. I am proud to stand here today representing the boys and girls in the community of Pass Christian, where we serve right at 2,000 students. Now, there are some things that people don't typically know about us. When they talk about us, they usually talk about our high performance, but I'd like to just to give you a little bit of information about our schools. 63% of our students come from poverty, and all 4 of our schools are school-wide Title I schools. In contradiction to that, 75% of our schools are National Blue Ribbon schools, and 50% of our schools are National Title I schools. We believe that it is through high-quality pre-K through 12 education and in partnership with our families and communities that we achieve the national acclaim and consistent high performance that we enjoy. Now that I've done a little bit of a commercial for our school district, I'd like to just kind of start with these words. In the opening letter of the report, Mississippi Untapped Potential, How Child Care Impacts Mississippi's State Economy, Scott Waller of MEC and Cheryl Odom of the U.S. Chamber stated, "We see child care as a 2-generation workforce issue, crucial for our workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow. Access to affordable, quality child care is essential for working parents to enter, re-enter, and stay in the workforce, yet it is hard to come by. The challenges we face are persistent and complex, but solvable, and the business community must be part of that solution, and might I add, the legislature and educational institutions must also continue to do our part to support early childhood. For us in Pass Christian, the need to expand early childhood offerings was quite apparent when less than 50% of our students were coming to school prepared for on-grade level kindergarten instruction. So we went into action and we have added pre-K. So for the last 4 years, we've offered free pre-K to our students, and we have a very robust waiting list, as you might add. We also partner with one of our families in our community to open a child care, and our school district actually has a daycare center that's attached to one of our schools. So we leased that child care center out so that we could open the only child care in the city of Pass Christian. We are working differently to move the children in our community to the front of the line and challenging them to think critically to keep them there. So today, we will take a deep dive into how Mississippi's economy is linked to early childhood as we seek to better understand the unique needs of Mississippi's working parents and examine the current landscape of early childhood learning in our state. I would like to take this opportunity to briefly introduce to you our panelists. Today we have with us Dr. Jill Dent. She is the director of the Office of Early Childhood for the Mississippi Department of Education. Will you wait, so Dr. Dent. And then sitting in the middle, we have Sarah Izzy Pellegrin, and we're going to refer to her as Izzy today. She is the co-owner of Elucidata, and she's with us. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And we have with us Mr. Scott Waller. He is the president and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. Welcome. So I'm going to take a seat and sit with you so we can have more of a conversation, if that's okay with you. And we'll start with our questions. So our first question is going to be for Dr. Dent. Dr. Dent, our state is showing great promise with the introduction of pre-K collaboratives. Can you share the successes of this legislatively and industry-backed program? Please be sure to point out the benefits to children, families, and businesses.
Sure. So we have been working with the collaboratives and implementing this program since 2013. It feels like a day, but since we started this, but it also feels like 10 or 15 years too at the same time. So in this process, it was really interesting to see communities coming together, including school districts and child care centers and Head Start centers, working together to benefit children and families, and providing quality, high quality classroom experiences for them to be able to grow and learn and be able to be ready for kindergarten. And in that process, we found that being able to give them a high quality classroom environment, they were coming into kindergarten, 77% of them were coming into kindergarten ready and meeting that benchmark, that literacy benchmark. But we were also conducting Bergant's screenings so that we were not only looking at literacy, but we were also looking at all of the developmental domains of the child so that we could make sure that they were growing and make sure that they were progressing in the way that they should and didn't have any red flags. So when our teachers or administrators would conduct those Bergant screenings, we would, if we saw any red flags, we would offer referral services. And that was one of the biggest things that we saw that really impacted children. There were a few times that we caught children that needed dental services or needed eye exams, or I think we even had one that had lead poisoning, and just different things that we had to look at and be able to address so that their future could be on track and they could be healthy little individuals going and being ready for kindergarten. So with our program, there's so many facets and components of it, underlying, especially with policy. With the near benchmarks in the nation, we're one of 6 states in the nation. And did y'all hear me? One of 6 states in the nation that meet near high quality benchmarks for pre-K. And I'm so excited about that, but let me tell you the foundation of how that happened. It's written into the Act. All of these policy pieces are written into the Act, so we have to do them. We couldn't avoid them. So as these, and let me just say, one year, NAIR decided to change the benchmarks, and that was real surprising. But we had a plan. In the change, we had applied for a Kellogg grant, and within that grant, it was a method for coaching, job-embedded professional development. And these coaches are right beside our teachers in the collaboratives, and they were helping the teachers do what they needed to do to improve their practice and help them along. Celebrate their successes and then improve their practice. And so we were really excited about that. And that was the last little check to be able to make sure that we hit all 10 near benchmarks after they changed it. And so we were super excited. We didn't realize that was coming, but we were grateful that we had that backup plan. So You know, the other piece behind that is, with the policy piece, is our tax credits. And I think somebody else is going to talk about that, so I'm not going to beat that down. But the tax credits are really a tremendous way that that our collabs can go find extra funding that they can use for other purposes. So we're really excited about all of that. We're really encouraged by supporting our families. Collaboratives have programs in place to be able to do that, and they support those families in that way and supporting our children.
Thank you, Dr. Dent. I know one of the near standards talks about vision and strong leadership, and I would like to thank you and Dr. Wright for the vision and the strong leadership that you have in this particular area. Our next question will be for Izzy. In the Mississippi Untapped Potential Report, we learn about the challenges families face in finding quality and affordable daycare. What information would you like to share regarding the availability of childcare across our state? Please share the impact that it's having on the workforce.
Certainly. And so I'm only barely able to see these maps, so I'm going to go from memory, and y'all can check me.
I have it.
Oh, even better. Thank you. Okay. So I brought in two maps today that I'm very excited to share with everyone because I think that this illustrates the distribution of childcare and assets serving early childhood programs in a way that we don't often see compiled in data regarding Mississippi. So the first map that I draw your attention to is shaded blue and has rainbow polka dots. It's the distribution of childcare seats and early childhood community resources by county. We know that in Mississippi, we're very fortunate to have quite an array of programs that serve very young children and families raising very young children, but these programs can be a little bit scattershot, and until recently we didn't have a good visual of the distribution of where these programs are laid out. If you look at this map with the rainbow dots, you'll see some of our major child-serving programs in the state. That's Vroom, Excel by 5 Communities, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, our pre-K collaboratives, as Dr. Dent mentioned, United Way Communities, and then Communities with Reach Out and Read programs. Folks who have been doing work in Mississippi for a while will be unsurprised to see where these programs are concentrated. For my demographers in the room, they will all say this is just a population density map. And indeed, in our more densely populated areas, we see more of these programs being put into effect. The dots are overlaid on the child care seats that are licensed by the state of Mississippi. So these are licensed child care centers, the number of seats available in each, or not available, but the number of seats licensed in each of those counties. Here again, you'll see our population density effect with not only the greatest number of child-serving programs, but also the greatest number of seats concentrated in the Jackson metro area, and then scattered on the coast in the South Haven area, and then some up in Tupelo. So one of the takeaways from this map that I really want to draw your attention to is that when we think about our underserved communities in Mississippi, we know we have a lot of programs on the ground. We know we have a lot of assets that are working hard to serve our families and children, but the distribution of these assets really matters, and you'll see that we do have some undercovered areas. There is a bit of a pattern here that I really want to reveal in looking at this distribution, and for that, I would ask you to turn your attention to my Christmas colors map. So this red and green map looks at the ratio of children under age 5 in Mississippi counties to the number of licensed child care seats in those same counties. Now earlier Ms. Tavlin was talking about how important it is to offer families the choice of where to seek out child care options. And in these red counties, the choice of enrolling your children in a licensed child care facility is much more limited. The counties that are shaded red have fewer than 1 seat available in licensed child care facilities per the number of children under 5 in those counties. This one is not a population density map. You'll see that some of our major cities have a very green county, so a higher ratio. They have more seats than children, but we can also attribute a great deal of that into influx from commuting workers. So for instance, Lee County has has greater than 1 seat available per child, but we also know a lot of families commute into the Tupelo area to work. In the southern half of the state, and particularly in the Southwest Corridor, we see a pretty significant disparity in that a great number of these counties are underserved by licensed child care facilities. So families in those areas have less access to licensed child care centers in which to enroll their children and have to use various other options. So that is one choice that is less available to those families. And I think that together, these two maps really illustrate the kind of landscape of what child care availability and early childhood programming in Mississippi looks like across the state and how that geographic distribution is relevant.
Thank you, Izzy. It looks like we've really made a lot of progress in this area, but yet there are still some places where we need to continue to work and grow. I have a saying that I like to follow, that the seeds of the day are best planted in the first hour. And just from listening to all of the information that's been shared this morning thus far, we are either going to invest now or we will pay later. So thank you for those comments and for bringing all of that good information to light. Next, we'd like to hear from Mr. Waller. Scott, the report also brings to the surface the profound impact of the child care breakdown that Tuna has mentioned this morning, and the impact that it's having on us as a state. What are recent findings from the business world as it relates to this child care breakdown, and then highlight the Mississippi's workforce needs as well? What does that look like from a business point of view?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Evers, and thank everyone for being here. There's a lot of information that we've been talking about already this morning. I think we can kind of take it even a step further. I mean, it's obvious the financial impact of these breakdowns. I mean, the report that we are using, the Untapped Potential on Mississippi, was released literally 2 weeks before the world shut down. So imagine if we took that, as Kuna said earlier, into 2021, 2022, the impact would show probably even a greater loss. But even if we didn't, and only number we have is the $653 million in losses, either at the business level or at state tax level, that tells you we've got an issue that we need to address. And as far as the workforce goes, if we don't address these issues, we're never going to be able to truly address the workforce issue that we have in the state. Even prior to COVID, we were dealing with making sure we had qualified, skilled workers to fill the jobs that we had in the state. That has even become more prevalent now that this is happening. And one of the things that the report points out that we haven't talked about that I think is extremely important to talk about is that when it comes to continuing your education, continuing to get workforce training opportunities, to get the skills necessary for these jobs, child care is a big part of that equation as well. And I think that one of the, Kuna mentioned that 41% of people had some type of response back that there was issues when it came to child care and education continuing. But overall, 53% had some type of disruption. And when you think about you were trying to get them trained, get them into the workforce, and the disruption comes at the child care level, that's problematic. But what's even more problematic is 17% just completely decided it's not worth it. I just can't afford to go and get the training necessary to get the jobs we need because I do not have the ability to have my child taken care of. And that's where we as the business community, we as the public sector need to figure out how we can work together to address these issues to make sure we're providing those opportunities when it comes to giving the types of training necessary, giving them the assurance that they can have somewhere for their child to go. Because that's why this title of the 2017 report, which is really how we got involved in this to begin with the U.S. Chamber. You know, early childhood education has been a long, priority at MEC. In the 15 years I've been there, it's been at the forefront. But it really stepped up when the workforce of today Workforce of Tomorrow report came out, and we began working with the U.S. Chamber at that point, and then of course we did a deep dive into the state a couple of years later. But that title of that report says it all. Workforce today, workforce tomorrow. We've got to make sure we're getting our children the opportunity to learn, to be successful when they get into the K-12 system, so that they can progress into the workforce in the years to come. But if we don't have that today, the parents cannot be in today's workforce. And we've got to make sure that we're thinking about it from both perspectives, because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to address the issue of meeting the workforce needs that we have in the state, but it's also going to help us address the issue of creating more opportunities for our citizens to stay here in Mississippi for years to come.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question for you. Do you feel that there are issues, the issues that we're facing with child care and early childhood education, do you feel that they're having an impact on businesses considering locating to Mississippi? If so, how could the state find ways to address these?
Well, I think it does. I think I look at it in two perspectives. Businesses locating here, as well as businesses who we want to have expand their operations here. And all of that comes back to one thing: having that workforce availability. So the biggest impact comes from if we don't find a way to address it and we don't think about what's going on, which is, you know, when COVID hit, you know, everybody was in a situation where it was uncharted territory. We didn't know what we were dealing with. But as we got through that initial phase and a lot of our companies started coming back online, I was getting calls on a regular basis. Hey, child care is an issue. How can we, what can we do? How can we do it? And was working with the U.S. Chamber Foundation as they were gathering data on that. So what we've got to make sure we're doing, if we're talking about trying to attract companies, if we're talking about trying to keep our companies here and let them grow, is make sure that early childhood education and quality child care is at the forefront of what we've got to do. And I know that, you know, y'all are hearing more about this, but I mean, the Children's Foundation just recently released their blueprint, which outlines some of the information on how to address this. We at MEC have taken some of that information and included that into our overall strategic effort for kind of goals for the state. So as we go through this, it has to be a team effort. Again, working with the legislature, working with the educational community, working with the business community to pull all this together to address an issue that is vitally important in our state right now.
Thank you. And two more questions, if the audience will indulge us. And Dr. Dent, can you give us a little bit more information about the near standards? I would think if we're creating child care, early childhood opportunities even in our local communities, whether we're collaborative or non-collaborative, could you discuss the importance of those near standards and what they might mean to those of us who are looking into expanding child care in our communities?
So the near standards, the National Institute of Early Education Research presented these, years ago, but they consist of categories such as the teacher and the assistant education components, the maximum class size that a classroom can be at capacity, which is 20, teacher-child ratios, and professional development that our teachers, assistants, and administrators would receive. It also consists of quality improvement, making sure that the curriculum is aligned to the early learning standards, and that one of the most important things, I think, is the screening and referral component that I talked about earlier. So utilizing all of those pieces, it creates the opportunity to have this a high-quality environment for children. And states have the option to have components of quality improvement, such as different measures. In our process, we look at the Brigant scores, our literacy assessment scores, but we also look at our class scores. And class is the classroom assessment scoring system that measures the interaction between the teacher and the children. And so we felt like it was really important for us to look at the teacher's performance just as much as we looked at the child's performance in this classroom. And so utilizing this type of system or this type of categories in childcare, you know, if childcare wanted to do that, they could and strive to reach these steps. But we do have these in place for the childcare centers that are participating in our early learning collaboratives, as well as the Head Start site and the school district site.
Thank you. And lastly, what recommendations would you make, Izzy, and then each one of you, after she speaks, if you have at least one recommendation that you might make about what we're hearing today. We've heard that parents are discontinuing working in the workforce. We're hearing that there are spaces where there are not enough seats for children. Could you give us at least one recommendation that you feel would help us move the needle in this area?
Sure. The recommendation that I would suggest is that when we look at what the data suggests about the distribution of early child care and seats available in Mississippi, we see that the needs are not the same across the board. So the strongest recommendation I can offer is that we need a data-driven approach to increasing the number of seats, and not just seats, but high-quality seats available to families in Mississippi. Seeing that some of the areas of the state are distinctly underserved as compared to other areas of the state that have an abundance of child care seats. We know that a one-size-fits-all option across the state of Mississippi is not going to be what we need in order to increase the options that families have.
Well, I'll just say awareness. I think we've got to do a better job of making everyone aware, particularly those in the business community, of why this is important, because it's really easy to overlook and not think about, you know, the child from a standpoint of the impact it has on the parent and their ability to be in the workforce. So I think the more we can talk about this, the more we can get to the business community, the information that we're learning, the better we can be.
So one of the things that I would make a recommendation about is for our communities to become involved in creating a collaborative. Not that the collaborative is the only and best, I'm not saying that, but it gives you the opportunity to create these high quality classrooms, and it provides you the funding to do it. And so hopefully this session, we will receive some increased funding, and we'll be able to offer more opportunities to receive that grant for different communities. And so I'm really hoping that communities are starting to meet and talk about it, even if it's not this year, maybe next year, to start having those conversations. And even if there's not any funding available, community providers need to come together and have these conversations to get these kids ready to move into kindergarten, no matter what provider the children are coming from.
Thank you. Let's thank our panelists for the insight that they shared today. Thank you.